What's going on? Welcome to Tech with Sean, and today we're taking a look at the MSI GE75 Raider, and this is a big powerful laptop, but it has a couple of big flaws that I think you should know about before going in. This configuration I have here is available at Costco in the United States, and it has an i7-10750H, that's the 10th gen processor with 6 cores, 12 threads. It has 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, and that's 2 separate DIMMs in there, so none of it's soldered on, and it's upgradable if you want to do that later. For storage, it has a 512 megabyte NVMe SSD and a 1 terabyte 5400 RPM regular hard drive. And for the GPU, it has the non-Max-Q version of the RTX 2060, so altogether, those are pretty decent specs for gaming. It has a SteelSeries RGB keyboard, and it has 4 really big laptop speakers in there, so for a laptop, as far as they go, this has some pretty loud speakers. And finally, for the display, it has a 17-inch 144Hz IPS, and it has really nice color, really saturated, really bright, and overall, on paper, it's a really nice spec computer for the price. Like a lot of gaming laptops, out of the box at the stock settings, it does run kinda hot and loud, but with some tweaking with software, you're able to bring that down and get the performance more to where you'd want it to be. Using Quick CPU, I limited the CPU frequency to 3.6 GHz on all 6 cores, and this was able to keep the 2060 running at full utilization, but kept the CPU temperatures down in the 70s. Then on the 2060, I did an undervolt and kept it running in the 1800 MHz, and it was also in the 70s, so noticeably less fan noise, noticeably lower temperatures, but pretty similar performance-wise to the stock settings. With all of this set up, with the system mostly running in the 70-degree range with that big bright IPS screen and the loud speakers, it does have the setup to deliver a pretty good gaming experience. But I did say this laptop had some flaws, and while that big 17-inch IPS bright screen is one of the main selling points of it, it's also one of the big flaws. This has some of the worst backlight bleed that I have ever seen on a laptop. It wasn't just annoying on black screens or when games were loading, but it was definitely noticeable in almost every dark scene in every video that I watched. Also, the laptop doesn't open with one finger. Now, typically this isn't a deal breaker to me, it's not that big of a deal to have to open your laptop with 2 hands, but there is so much tension in the springs on this screen that when you open it up, it's just Flex City with the panel wobbling back and forth. And I think that's going to contribute to this backlight bleed problem getting worse and worse over time. Also, there has been at least one person reporting in the reviews on the Costco website that one of their hinges has totally broke. The other really major flaw with this laptop to me is the battery life. Now, lots of gaming laptops don't have the greatest battery life, but the combination of a 17-inch screen with that many nits compared with that small of a battery means that with this thing, you're going to be lucky to get 2 hours on the battery with everything turned down at a low brightness setting. If you're trying to run a game on a battery, just forget about it. And if you want to watch like videos or something with the brightness turned up, you're going to be really looking closer to 1 hour. So with that short of a battery life, this isn't really something that you're going to want to take to class to take notes on or take to a meeting to show, a client a presentation on, because unless you can get that all wrapped up in about 30 or 45 minutes, you're going to be worrying about the battery running out. And one other flaw to me, it's not as major as the other two, but it's going to be the interior part with the keyboard and trackpad. Now in general, the keyboard is nice to type on, but it has some weird decisions with some skinny number keys, and they took the Windows key and flip-flopped it to the other side of the keyboard, so that takes some getting used to. These MSI SteelSeries laptops are also known for the paint wearing off, so you'll see a lot of these used where the paint on the WASD keys, for instance, will be worn off, so that's something to keep in mind if you buy one of these. I'm also not a huge fan of the trackpad. Now, I know a lot of people like the dedicated buttons, but myself, I would prefer just to have one single larger glass trackpad than something like this. And visually, I'm not a big fan of that red bezel that goes around it. In general, the whole black and red aesthetics of their mid-range gaming laptops look kinda dated to me. If you look at their GS66 and the Stealth series, I think those have a more minimalist black aesthetic, and I'd like to see them maybe move more towards that direction with the mid-range, even if the construction is more plastic. Performance-wise, this falls just in line with where you think it would. You know, it's a full power 2060, and with this big 17-inch chassis, it's really not going to hold it back that much. You may get some thermal throttling at the default settings just because it seems to run kind of hot, but using quick CPU and Afterburner, I was able to get results in benchmarks and games that were in line with any other gaming laptop of this price range. Here's 3D Mark Firestrike. This is a gaming benchmark that, you know, combines a CPU and GPU load. And for this, it gets what you'd really expect an RTX 2060 laptop to, and it scores right over 15,000. So that's a pretty decent score, and that's going to be a good performer for 1080p gaming. Next is Forza Horizon 4. This is running at 1080p ultra settings, and this was really smooth playing it a little bit, and here on the benchmark you can see that we got 109 frames per second, and so for the 144Hz screen, that's going to be a really nice experience. And next up is a new benchmark for me. This is Strange Brigade, and I got this on the Humble Choice last month. And this came in at 115 frames per second, so that's another really good result for the 2060. And lastly, let's take a look at Red Dead Redemption 2. You can see here I have it running on mixed settings, and it delivered basically in between 60 and 70 frames per second. It's pretty good to play with a 60 frame lock with these settings. And here it got a 64 frames per second for the average in the benchmark. Now I ran it again without the undervolt and without the quick CPU adjustments on the processor, and even though it was running at higher frequency with much higher temperatures, it actually got a lower frame rate, so running with that GPU undervolt especially is the way to go. There's also an option if you put in some advanced stuff in the BIOS screen, you can go in and enable undervolting in there, but really just turning down the frequency and quick CPU for me made a way bigger difference than any undervolt. So all in all, if you're looking for a desktop replacement type computer that you're going to take maybe from house to house or room to room, or maybe you work on the road and you want like a almost desktop type setup that you can use in a hotel room or something, this is probably a pretty good option for you. But if you're looking for something more mobile, you want to be untethered from that AC adapter once in a while, and you want to take notes or take it to a meeting or something, I think you need to keep looking, because this just doesn't have the battery life to really be a truly portable device. Also, if you're sensitive to backlight bleed, you might want to keep looking, because even though this is just one unit, I've seen plenty of other reviews of this model where people mention it, and MSI's 17-inch laptops in general, in my experience, have been more susceptible to backlight bleed than other brands. But if you can pick one of these up at a good enough deal, or you get one for Christmas or something, it's got really capable hardware, and you're gonna get almost a desktop, level gaming performance from it with just a couple of tweaks. So I hope this video was helpful. If it was, make sure to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you in the next video.